Y'all, welcome back to Kentucky Fried Wargaming, where two guys who aren't qualified to talk about anything decide to talk about a game with hard math and chance. I'm Joe.
And I'm John.
And y'all, we had a conversation before trying to start this, but I think we finally got here. We're ready for an episode. It was painful to try to remember the intro, but it makes sense for our faction that we're talking about today. As we continue to try to focus and do a video on every single faction in Warhammer 40k 10th edition, it's come time to talk about perhaps the most wicked faction in Warhammer.
Yeah, I think the cruelest and probably most industrial faction is the Dark Eldar.
The Drukhari.
The Drukhari. They only listen to typo negative and like Marilyn Manson. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but that's what they do. But what they are in the setting is, we've already talked about the Eldar and the Eldari and how they decided to like kind of self-discipline their way through this Slaanesh problem. Drukhari are the opposite. They just went further and deeper and darker than their predecessors. And they basically commit cruel, obsessive acts to sacrifice to Slaanesh to prevent themselves from being consumed by Slaanesh.
Yeah, for those who might not have watched the Eldar video, which you should, but TLDR, the Eldar used to be one race long, long ago, when they were masters of the galaxy. And then as everything got too comfortable and they wanted to fill their time because they are hyper-emotional beings and they didn't want the boredom, they became more and more debased and degenerate and did more and more horrible acts, and eventually spawned a Chaos God we now know as Slaanesh that devoured 99% of their, glorious empire and species. And now the factions you see, it's all just about how they responded to try to survive this.
Yes, and so the way the Dark Eldar responded, the Drukhari, is that they went into the webway, into this like dark, essentially like hidden city called Comorragh.
It's like a pocket dimension.
It's a pocket dimension city that they live in, and by city, I mean it that loosely. It is like many planets in size, that is filled with everything terrible. It's just like peak 90s industrial and everything. We actually probably shouldn't talk about a lot of it on YouTube.
Yeah, I will say, if you go looking at the lore for this species, it gets a little uncomfortably dark at times, depending on your sensibilities.
Yeah,
so this is the only time where I might say, tread carefully.
Yeah, as a general content warning, be careful about looking into this faction if you are sensitive to certain topics. It's not a bad thing. Just want to make sure you don't, hurt yourself when reading lore. But it's really, as a society, just a bunch of people backstabbing each other all the way up a ladder, and even the guy at the top doesn't get a chance to take a break because he is still just having to stab people trying to come for his throne. Like, it is constant, vigilant society of trying to fuck people over and not get fucked over yourself. It's in gladiatorial pits, it's in just like the cabals, it's in the homunculus covens, which for homunculus covens are like mad scientist laboratories where they're mixing and matching genetics of different alien species with their own and trying to find like a way to live forever and avoid Slaanesh via that way. Like, there's a lot going on in this faction. Similar to the Eldari, they have a ton of lore and a ton of things to dive into, but how they mostly play out on the tabletop is with the idea of being like space pirates going out into the galaxy, capturing people and bringing them back to suffer inside of Comorragh.
Yeah, because largely speaking, the Slaanesh, the Chaos God that the elves created, is now trying to devour all of their souls.
Yes.
Yeah, every elf that gonna die, their soul will go straight to Slaanesh for eternal torment. They are damned as a species. But the Eldar the Drukhari have found that As they are being drained away just by trying to stay alive, they become weaker and frail as they are being pulled towards Slaanesh. That if they inflict pain and suffering on other beings, that will pay the tithe and allow them to remain alive and strong.
Yes.
So these raids, they go out to find slaves to bring back to cause pain to them and cause pain on these raids. And that's what plays out as their faction rule on the tabletop. So we've got it up on the screen over there. There's a lot of wording, but it's not very complicated. It is simpler than it first seems. So first things first is it's literally called Power Through Pain, which is one of their sayings that goes way, way back. It's at the core of the faction. And you get a number of pain tokens depending on the size of the battle. So if you're playing a 2,000 point strike force mission, you get 3 pain tokens at the start of the game. And then additionally, as you are playing the game, you can get 1 more pain token every time you destroy an enemy unit, or any time an enemy unit fails a battle shock. And that just gets added to your pain pool. And then you could spend that to empower your units in 2 different ways. So you can try to empower their movement abilities, which if you do it in the movement phase, could let them reroll advances or charges.
Very good.
It's incredible, especially on some of these units that are very melee threat focused. Reroll charges, very good. Or you can empower in the shooting or fight phase. In that case, each model in the unit, every time they make an attack, can reroll hits, depending on the phase that you burn it in. So you cause pain to get the tokens, and then use that to allow your units to punch above their weight class, get in there when they shouldn't have, or just overall break the rules of reality through, industrialized systemic torture. It's horrific.
Yeah. These are the ultimate antagonists. Chaos are evil and bad, but most of the time they're tragic. These are still tragic, but they are really, really bad.
I would argue the worst.
Yes.
And that's not where it ends. Because some of them are hyper specialized in causing particular amounts of pain, which comes to their detachment rule.
Yeah, so their detachment rule is called Real Space Raiders, and there's a thing they do called Real Space Raids. And when they do, they normally are a conjunction of 3 different sub-factions within the bigger faction of Drukhari, which are the Cabals, the Witch Cults, and the Homunculus Covens. And they show that off by if you have a Archon, a Succubus, and a Homunculus Coven, or any variation of those 3, you will get additional pain tokens for your army rule.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of incentivize you bringing all 3 in, but with different data sheets to kind of mix together to really kick off this raid.
Yeah, the idea is that, a well-diversified raid is probably the most successful of them. So try to do so with your armies, which I think is a nice sort of carrot idea rather than giving you the stick of, you get a benefit for doing it, but you don't have to.
Yeah. In previous editions, they forced you to play with this mechanic, and sometimes it led to some really bad design. Here, it's all just if you'd like to. If you really don't want to bring any of the witch cults, you don't have to. If you don't want to bring any homunculus covens, you don't have to.
I think that's good game design. I'm a fan of that.
Yes.
And this is an army that I will admit, y'all, it is hard to find representative units because, as we mentioned, there's a number of sort of sub-factions with different themes running through this force. So it's hard to pick one data sheet that is representative of all of those sub-factions because they're quite different from one another by design. But I've done my best to pick one that I think kind of shows the overarching idea of the Drukhari. And for me, that is the Archon. And the Archon is not necessarily the flashiest unit in the book, but I think it shows how they sort of work together with synergistic ideas to do more than they otherwise would be able to. So if you look over there, stat line is kind of a tale of two stories. Like an 8-inch movement, holy crap, that's incredible. But toughness 3, 4-up save, it don't look great at first, but he has a 2-up invuln. Caveat that once you fail an invuln save, he no longer has it. But at the start of the game, 2-up.
It's very good. And considering he's going to be in a unit, you're not going to immediately start rolling that.
And I have thrown huge amounts of units into an Archon and had our buddy Seth pass like 14 2-ups in a row. I've never disliked Seth before. I did in that moment. It's rough. So like that's a really, really good trick. Also though, he is no slouch in melee with 5 attacks, hitting on 2s, strength 3, so like he's really good against smaller stuff, but minus 2 AP and 2 damage. That's quite good. But I think what you're really taking him for is his abilities, which are really, really nicely. So he can lead a unit, of course, but while he's leading a unit, his unit rerolls wound rolls of 1, and if that unit is empowered, each time they do it, you reroll all the wound rolls.
That's very good. Especially
reroll
for
all
the way
wounds
these guns
is a high
work.
value buff. Yeah.
Yeah, especially in this faction. Like, especially in this faction.
High value buff anywhere, even more so here. And then that sort of helps you punch high, but Devious Mastermind is what screws with your opponent. And really just like, not only in-game causes pain, but causes out-of-game pain to your opponent.
Yes.
Devious Mastermind is an ability that you could use once per battle when you're, if this model is your warlord, and he's gonna be. And he's on the battlefield, so he has to be alive. But when he uses it until the end of the battle, you increase the cost of your opponent's stratagem they're trying to use by 1. For the whole game.
It's really good.
And like some factions have mainstay stratagems that they're going to want to use every turn. This really messes with that plan.
And even if they don't, and your opponent tries to use command reroll, just use that there. Like, look at your opponent and go, are you really willing to spend 2 command points every time you want to use command point reroll? Most people will say no.
Especially now when command points are so precious, it applies a lot of pressure. And I think that alone is probably worth taking him in many instances, but add the rest of the sheet to it, and I think he is just a great representation of how much pain one cruel person could cause in the Drukhari.
Absolutely.
But I mean, John, that guy has an 8-inch move, but let's be honest, he's never going to set foot on the ground.
Yeah. So, you're going to take a lot of boats, right, in Dark Eldar. We call them boats, but they're transports, right? You're going to bring Venoms, you're going to bring Raiders, you're going to bring Ravagers, you're going to bring their jet fighters. Like, you're going to bring these things.
Pirates need pirate ships.
Yes. My pick is going to be the Raider, right? I think that there's a spot for every one of the transports and every one of the vehicles in this book. But I think the Raider is really kind of the thing that you're going to see all the time. At least one of, if not multiple. It has a high transport capacity of, I believe, 12, 11, something like that. It can deep strike, which is very good. Like,
yeah,
do not hesitate to, like, if you really want to keep this safe, leave it in reserves, deep strike it like turn 2, and back your enemy's objectives, and just start shooting. It can move 14, so it can go basically wherever it wants. In addition to that, if it wants to advance, it can auto-advance 6 with Ether Sails, its ability. But it's weak, so you're going to have to play cagey with it, because it's T8, which is not very tough for a vehicle with only 10 wounds, and a 4-up save. Compared to other vehicles, it is kind of tissue paper. But it does benefit you, because it can still bring heavy weapons, right? It can bring a Dark Lance or a Disintegrator Cannon, both of which have different purposes. For me, I would probably pick Dark Lance because this army is really good at taking down infantry. It's less good at taking down vehicles unless it dedicates into doing it, and this lets you get just a little bit more.
And also, I think important is it's got firing deck 11.
Yes, so everything inside of it can shoot.
Yeah, so a lot of transports, when you put all your stuff in it, They're just stuck inside waiting to get out to unleash their firepower. But here, everyone can throw their guns over the rails and unload while you're moving, which significantly increases the firepower. Remember, the Archon we just talked about gives his unit reroll wounds while they're shooting and empowered. That unit is the sort of thing you're going to put in this.
Yes.
So in addition to its guns, their guns will be in the mix. Spicy. And I think really representative of the faction. KG play with transports is a lot of what makes Drukhari work.
I would agree.
And this is just the reason why people like their transports so much. They do a lot of work for reasonable amounts. But Drukhari can be a hard faction to play and learn because they're kind of cagey. So if you're into this faction and you're going to go look up more and maybe you're a little interested, you're going to pick them up on the tabletop, maybe you're getting back into them, maybe you're looking for your first army, we want to leave you a practical gameplay tip to help you ease your transition just a little bit into playing the Force and helping you to get success early on. John, if you were going to give advice to a Drukhari player, what would be your tip for learning?
So my big advice is to get comfortable with the idea that your army is not going to stay together. Most armies in this game have stuff on their foot, and they are kind of clustered around together, and they might move in little quadrants together. But this force does not do that at all. This force is all inside their boats, and they just fly forward, and each boat does a different thing, and does they are all tag teaming up on things, kind of like packs of wolves to take stuff down, and then scattering. Mm-hmm. They do not worry about losing stuff. This is the king of trade up.
Yeah. Much like a Drukhari Archon, you are not worried about the well-being of your troops.
Yeah, you are just going to throw stuff into other units that you need dead, and hope that you kill more points than you spent on that unit.
Yep.
And you're just going to keep throwing stuff at it, and you're going to try to keep your pieces alive for as long as possible, while also doing as much damage as possible. And that movement really supports that. So bring a lot of transports, bring a lot of stuff, shoot a lot of guns, and just really, you gotta get a feel for it. You gotta play it a bunch, but it's a blast. It is genuinely fun to play. It's a very high, fast-paced army.
Yeah. And I think that leads into my tip. Similar, my notes just say transports are your friend.
Yes.
But there's multiple reasons for that. One, your army isn't super durable. Most Drukhari units have a toughness of 3, and if they get caught out in the open, just about any amount of firepower will mow them down.
Guardsmen will even just eat them to shreds.
Yeah, it's rough. They're not made to foot slog and take a lot of hits. They will die. And the transports give you a way to bubble wrap them for a while, to where at least they have to kill the transports before your unit spills out and can get shot. So it increases your survivability artificially. And second, it gets them close so that they can get in and do the melee threats. Because really a lot of units here want to do the business up close, and the transports give you a way to get there without foot slogging up the board and eating those shots.
Yeah.
The high movement on those transports can save you a ton of pain and allow you to cause it instead. And Dark Eldar is probably a little bit more niche of an army, especially because of the flavor. But for the people who like Drukhari, they love Drukhari.
Yes.
It's kind of a Marmite faction, but maybe you're out there and you're super into it. And if you are, please look through the data sheets, and if you have any questions, feel free to post them in the comments down below or send them to us on social media. We are more than happy to answer any specific questions you might have, or give list advice, or help you ease the transition, because this could be a tough army in particular to try to figure out. And for the rest of y'all out there, Drukhari's not for you. No worries, it ain't for me. But we're doing all the factions, so check out the channel. Maybe there is an army that's for you if you're looking around or just looking for fluff. We've probably got something for you, and if not, well, at least you got a couple of chuckles. And we'll be working on the rest and get them out as soon as we possibly can. For now, that's been all of our opinions. Bonafide and Kentucky Fried. We'll see y'all in the next one.